Howdy ho, folks. Howdy ho. Howdy ho, America and points beyond. Who has power and what are they doing with it? Politics is not a natural act.
That's right.
That's right.
I must admit, I never heard that one from you, Jim.
There's so many feisty fighters against the greedheads and boneheads. So grab a libation, join the conversation. It's the personal side of politics, and it is surprisingly tasty. Indeed, hoping that you'll get your own libation and pull up here to the table at the old Chat and Chew, because we've got a very special show for you here this week, and it is a reunion at the old happy hour at the Chat and Chew table here, otherwise known as my kitchen, because we're going to visit again with several people that we've had on our show presenting to you in the past. And this is because my own peak. I read a story sometime about something that's going on, and I think, well, isn't that interesting? And then later on, I think, whatever happened to that? Nobody ever comes back and tells us what was the result. So we're trying to do that on the old Hightower Lowdown Chat and Chew show to bring some people back to see, well, did they make any progress? Are they okay? Or where are we with it? Because, we're in a long-term fight here. And that's something that I preach a lot, is that, we make some strides forward, and then we take a couple of steps back, and then we make some more strides forward. It is a long-term fight that we're involved in for little people's democratic power in our country. You win some, you lose some. When I lost office here in the state of Texas some years ago, I noted that, Texas politics is kind of like being a peacock. One day you're a peacock and the next day you're a feather duster. So stuff happens, but that doesn't mean you quit. You keep pushing on. You got to persevere. Willie Nelson put it like this. He said, the early bird might get the worm, but it's the second mouse that gets the cheese. Think about that. I'll let it lay out there a little bit for you. But indeed, we're part of a continuum here. Long-term fights. You think of the suffrage movement, for example. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and the great trio that launched that movement, along with so many grassroots people. And yet they didn't live to vote. None of them lived to vote. It took 75 years before that movement that began in Seneca, New York, culminated in the amendment that allowed women to vote, to establish the right of women to vote, I should say. So that continuum is what we're representing here tonight and touting here tonight. So let's just get underway with it. We'll take you to visit with Sharon Levine, a champion over in Louisiana and what's called Cancer Alley, or actually she and her cohorts refer to it as Death Alley. So she's taking on a fight at a local level that is global in power. So let's go to Louisiana and get an update from Sharon Levine. Now let's go to Louisiana. In fact, if you take your dictionary and thumb it through to the term grassroots scrappiness, what you'll find is a picture of this lady. She would be Sharon Levine. She is the founder of Rise St. James, based in St. James Parish, Louisiana, just down the road from New Orleans and Baton Rouge, in an area known unfondly in that area as Cancer Alley, or more specifically as Death Alley. There are 150 petrochemical plants on an 85-mile stretch of the Mississippi River right there. Now, with petrochemical plants come enormous amounts of poison in the water, in the air, in the soil. So Sharon Levine, who was a school teacher, resigned her school teacher position to become a rebel with a cause. And that cause is environmental justice. She is the winner, by the way, of the 2021 Goldman Environmental Prize, a prestigious award because of the activism, not only in her spirit, but also that she has inspired in others in that parish and really all around the country. Sharon Levine, thanks so much for being back with us. Joy to have you. We've our listeners responded really tremendously to the story that you told last year on this program. So we wanted to bring you back and thank you at the start here for letting us intrude upon you again. I guess we're in your kitchen, it looks like to me.
Yes.
And but before we even get into the meat of this, let's mention Hurricane Ida. You had a little experience with that, didn't you, in the last year?
Yes, I did. I had a whole lot of experience with Hurricane Ida. Hurricane Ida destroyed my home. First, it destroyed my roof. Then after that, I was living in one room in my house. Then Hurricane Nicholas came 2 weeks later and destroyed that one room that I was living in. So now I'm living in a travel trailer right next to my house. And the trailer is so small that I can't put my clothes in there. So now I'm trying to get a bigger trailer so I can get a contractor to redo my whole house because the whole house is damaged.
So, and that's not easy. I know from here in Austin where we had problems with the weather, and contractors are scarce and pricey.
Yes, they are pricey.
Right. They are pricey. But you got to have that roof over your head, and so Sharon lives in this trailer, but then pops over to her house to do work every morning with her laptop.
Morning. Yes,
right
every
there.
morning.
So you're at your kitchen table, I'm in my kitchen table, and we invite all of our listeners to pull up to their kitchen tables and join us here for this discussion about Rise St. James, grassroots activist organization of just regular folks who came together. In fact, Sharon, as I recall from our previous conversation, in your original meeting of Rise St. James was in your garage. Is that right?
The first one was in my home, and the next one was in the garage.
In the garage.
Yes. And then after that, after the second meeting, we had a march on November 3rd. It was about 2 weeks after the second meeting. We planned a march, and we had a march right here, almost a mile from where they want to build the Formosa Plastics plant. And that was a big success.
And that's the big fight against Formosa Plastics Corporation.
Yes, but they are not coming here. I want to give you an update. The update is the Army Corps of Engineer is doing a EIS on Formosa, and that's going to take about a year or two. And Formosa, I was told that they are not coming, but they haven't made it official yet.
EIS is an environmental impact statement.
Yes.
And they had to undergo one of those because Rise St. James rose up and went from that garage to that march and then got the attention of the officials who said, we're not going to just be poisoned forever. And again, 150 petrochemical plants. I think there are like a dozen within your own district of the parish that you're in. So this small area has a dozen of these petrochemical plants spewing stuff out. You've called it a cesspool to live there. Tell what you do experience.
It's the smell. I passed by the plant yesterday morning. I'm going to pass again today, and the smell is so strong. It smells like chlorine. It smells like ammonia. It smells like a rotten egg. It smells like an unknown smell. And if Formosa would come in here, they would have ethylene oxide, and that's cancer causing to unborn fetus. And it's cancer, brain cancer, breast cancer. So we can't have that coming here because we already have 12 within a 10-mile radius. Then we have 9 on the east bank across from us. So it's just like a cesspool, and it's like a death sentence for us. So it's not going to come here and poison us.
On either side of the river, there are these plants, and as I understand it, Sharon, that Formosa would then triple the amount of poisons, contaminants being emitted in your area.
In my neighborhood, yes, in the 5th district. Then it's going to double throughout the parish. So we're not going to be able to live.
Formosa Plastics, when we last talked, said that they were going to run over the local people and take over.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
I don't think so. They're not going to take over St. James.
Took that attitude. You had to stand up to it.
That's right.
So they did not. And as you are now telling us, environmental impact study has been required.
Yes.
And the arising of St. James Parish has led to the scooting of Formosa Plastics, perhaps, as far as we can tell right now. We don't know. So we got to keep the pressure on.
Yes.
Where's the government? Where are our leaders? Cancer in Louisiana is not an unknown entity.
Leaders need to be out. We need to vote those leaders out. Every last one. They don't want us to help. They don't want to help us fight Formosa Plastics or any other industry. So we need to vote them out.
And you're talking now, Joe Biden ran for president, and he came to Cancer Alley, did he not? Maybe not to your parish.
He came to the parish that's next to St. James. He came to St. John the Baptist, which is bad too. It's really bad over there too.
And said that he was going to do something about it.
And have you heard him? The EPA came down to speak with us, and I appreciate that. But and the EPA is going to give us some air monitors to put in our neighborhood, which is good. But I want to see Joe Biden.
There you go.
I want to see him.
Air monitors are to prove what you've been saying, which is that cancer-causing carcinogens are coming out of these plants. And as I understand it, this is not an esoteric argument. People are dying. People are dead, in fact, from these poisons.
That's right, from these poisons.
Getting air monitors so you can prove to the government, your elected officials, including Joe Biden, that, in fact, guess what? There's poison in the air, and poison in the water, poison in the soil.
Yes. So how much more do they want us to do? They want us to give them our blood. I'm being tested now for plastic in my blood. I already have aluminum and lead in my blood. What more do they want from us? And people over here have cancer. I can give you a number of people with cancer, a lot of women with breast cancer. So what more do they want? They want us to lay down on a chopping block and let them cut our neck off? What do they want with us? They want to take over our land. They're already taking over our air and our water and our soil. They want us to just die off. They don't want to buy us out. They want us to die out. So I want to meet with President Biden. I love President Biden. I think he's wonderful. He's the only one that tried to look at what's going on with us. And I appreciate that. I really appreciate it. But I want to talk to him face to face and let him know how we are dying rapid. That's all I want. I just want to talk to him face to face. I enjoy talking to Michael Regan. I enjoy talking to Jamie Pinkham. That was wonderful. It made the community feel good because they talked to the people, not the politicians. Mm-hmm. The politicians were angry because they didn't ask for them. They asked for us. They asked for Robert Taylor from St. John the Baptist Parish, and they asked for Sharon Levine from St. James Parish. Our parish president didn't like that because they didn't go to him. Mm-hmm. He is not with us. He is for industry. Industry is fine as long as in this place and as long as it's not going to poison us. Industry is fine. But when you start to poison people and killing people, no, you have to go. Yeah. That's what we are fighting. We're fighting for our lives over here in St. James and St. John the Baptist.
And, they always say, it's glorious news. We got Formosa Plastics going to come in here. We got more jobs for you. And they don't mention that, by the way, your air and water and soil are going to be poisoned. Your garden won't come up anymore because of the poison in the soil.
That's right.
And you're likely to die.
That's right.
Other than that, it's a wonderful thing.
Yes. And that's
of course, we want industry. We want business, but not exploitation. not just an
Yes,
intrusion, literally into our bodies and lives. So
that's right.
that's what you stand for. Now, what keeps you going? What keeps your spirit pumping?
I read my Bible. I
No,
read my Bible daily, and when I'm depressed, oh, that depression come on me so strong because I feel like sometimes I feel like I'm helpless. Then when I get the Bible and I read it, it lifts me up. It lifts me up. And then when I go to church on Sunday mornings, I sing in the choir. Oh, that lifts me up. I'm not going to lie to you. It lifts me up. It's like Jesus is talking to me. And the songs is related to me and the works that I'm doing. So I have to keep that Bible at hand because I get depressed sometimes. I
well, it
really
is a
do.
spiritual fight, but it's also spiritually uplifting to recognize that you're not alone. So this is the
Mhm.
kind of spirit that exists in our country. It's not a spirit
Yes.
of great leaders. It's a spirit of great leadership at the local level, at that grassroots level. So, Sharon, I thank you for joining us again
You're
on the
welcome.
Lowdown Happy Hour here with
Thank
our
you for
Lowdown
having me. Thank you for having me.
on all that's going on. So, just before we go, though, what's next, and how what would you ask people to do to be a part of to help you, but also to help themselves?
They can join with Rise St. James. They can go online. There is a button that they would click on to join with us. And also they can see our newsletter and they can go to our website. And if they want to donate, just go to risestjames.org. And you can also read about us on our website.
All right. Sharon Levine, Rise St. James. We've all got to rise up. Thanks a
That's
bunch.
right.
See you
Thank
next.
you. All
Bye
right.
bye.
See you next time. Bye bye.
Man, I am just blown away by Sharon. She
Yes.
is just one of my favorite. I mean, like, can you imagine being a retired school teacher and actually stopping Formosa Plastics from coming to your neighborhood? Like, this is what we're talking about. And she's actually, like, she's literally saving lives here.
It's the perseverance that matters, and the intentionality. Because she, as she explained, just took it on, and it's not her alone, and that's an important point to make here, because she had that first meeting in her garage, and then they had a march, and they just continued together, and it continues to grow. So one person standing up gets another person standing up, and soon enough you might have a local movement, and that local movement might become a big movement. So that's the power that's represented. Some people say, well, you can't fight City Hall alone. I'm just a small person. Well, I tell you that there's a thing that I said all the time, and that is that even the smallest dog can lift its leg on the tallest building. So don't think
Amen.
power. Get out there and do it.
Yes, I love that. And you know what? We have a way that people can help get out and do it. Did you know this?
No, no. How is that?
Yes. I know. Well, as it turns out, we send out a weekly email to all of our subscribers, and it is free. And folks can sign up for that email right here at hightowerlowdown.org/email.
Say it again,
And
that it is free.
it is free.
You can just get.
You can just get it.
Isn't that fabulous? Okay.
And yeah, we send out this email pretty much every week and let people know what's happening with our friends out there in the world and how they can support them and how they can get involved too. And so that they are not alone, because none of us are alone.
Every week you can get it. And speaking of friends, let's now go across from Louisiana right into the Gulf Coast of Texas with my longtime friend, our longtime friend, really, Diane Wilson. We've had on our program a couple of times. She's another lifer who just fights like hell and just will not let go. And she is tenacious as can be and a great champion for environmental justice. So let's talk to Diane. Now we're going to go to Seadrift, Texas. Going to drift on down to Seadrift, right on the Gulf shore of our mighty state of Texas, and a series of bays there: Lavaca, Matagorda, San Antonio bays. They all are interconnected, and they're all fishing spots, both commercial fishing and tourist fishing. But we've got our old pal Diane Wilson with us. Now we've talked to Diane 2 or 3 times in the past because one, she is talkative, and 2, she knows what she is talking about. She is a 4th generation fisher lady, shrimp and otherwise. They're in those very same bays, and she lives in the little town of Seadrift. But Diane became not just a person involved in fishing, but she became an environmental champion the hard way by essentially being poisoned, both economically and environmentally, and having to take on these giant corporations. She had a 40-year battle, 40 years. She stuck with it in taking on Formosa Plastics Corporation, a giant entity out of Taiwan, a multi-billion-dollar empire there, making plastics down in Lavaca Bay at an area called Point Comfort. And she took them on and had a lot of ups and a whole bunch of downs and quite a bit of sideways, but stuck with it. And sure enough, she won. She won a federal court judgment against Formosa Plastics, the largest water judgment under the Water Act in the history of the United States. But she didn't just quit then. She moved on to take her expertise, take her experience, take her anger, and put it to use for other people in other fights. I would call her indefatigable, which is a big word that means stick to it. She doesn't quit. She doesn't back down. She just keeps plugging on. So, Diane, welcome. Glad to have you back with us.
Thank you very much, Jim. I always love coming here.
All right. And here we are with Diane. She's in her home there in Seadrift. And now your fight is still in Lavaca Bay, but this time it involves a ship channel and a mega corporation with a magic name of Max Midstream. That sounds pretty innocent, but I guess it's not. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, well, Max Midstream is not a small entity at all. I first heard about it when it was in the headlines, and it said a $1 billion oil export was coming in to our Matagorda, Lavaca Bay. And the interesting thing about Lavaca, Matagorda Bay, it's got a small ship channel. And for this $1 billion operation, they wanted to deepen and widen the Matagorda ship channel. And the thing of it is, it's in a Mercury Superfund site. And even Alcoa, another chemical company that took over Lavaca Bay, their own documents said they lost to the environment 1,200,000 pounds of mercury here. And so now you want Max Midstream to dredge it up and stir that mercury from one end to another. And then on top of that, is as if that wasn't enough, then you have Formosa right beside them, who has been putting out trillions of pellets into Lavaca Bay. Now they know that the mercury adheres to the pellets. And so you are making the biggest mess you could possibly make. And they're trying to do it.
And mercury, for those who might not understand it, it's not just something you might find in a thermometer. Mercury is a highly toxic poison, causing birth defects and all sorts of problems, cancers and heart conditions, and etc. And mercury stays pretty much forever. And so this EPA Superfund in Lavaca Bay, their solution is to basically try to keep the mercury buried down deep in the seabed. And that has been working to some degree. However, here comes Max Midstream saying, we would like to plow that bay up. And as Diane says, deepen and widen the ship channel. Because what, Diane? What are they going to do in that ship channel?
Well, they want to export crude oil from the Permian Basin, want to put it in pipelines, and then send it overseas and burn it up and pollute over there. And it's a man making mega bucks is basically what it is. And you know, and they don't mind destroying the bay in the process or destroying the fisheries in the fishing communities. Apparently they say, hey, we're going to bring in 200 workers. And what about all the fishermen that are dependent upon that bay? What about the little fishing communities? What about the people who like oysters? I mean, that's out the window.
Yeah, and that whole fishing industry, that's the people who do the fishing. That's folks who restaurants that sell the fish in that area, but also truckers and then marketers all over the country, really, who get fish from that area. And now the oyster fishing is in terrible situation because of this pollution. I know, even having closed a bunch of the oyster reefs in that area, which means that the people who do the fishing don't have a job.
That's right.
Getting an income.
That's true. Very true. Yeah.
So this is an economic disaster about to be made worse if Max Midstream gets its way. But in the way is Diane Wilson. And this time, Diane, you've had to fight alone for so many years, but this time I understand you've got some allies with you.
Oh, I do. I'm amazed. It still is hard for me to take over, coming from being such a loner to now having so many different groups out there willing to get involved. Matter of fact, when Max Midstream was doing their air portion of their permit, I believe there were over 3,000 people that signed on. And matter of fact, when I got a copy of it from the TCEQ, they sent it to interested parties, and it was about that thick.
Wow.
And they were all lists of people across the country who signed on to that as interested parties. So it has grown.
It shows that, while pollution doesn't stop one place, certainly you've got an interconnected bays and a Gulf of Mexico sitting right out there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
And then, but also the environmental fight spreads as well. People all over recognize their interest in that. While they might not be directly affected in Lavaca Bay, they're having the same kind of fight. And that's a great thing that I like about you, Diane, is you have taken your expertise, which she is now, she's now become an environmental scientist because she had to. And she didn't have a PhD, but she can do the JOB. Yeah. And that is going out there and working with other people. We had Sharon Levine on our program recently with the great people over in Louisiana who are fighting Formosa Plastics, one of the same corporations that you took on to take on. So this thing spreads, and the good news is that you spread as well and get out there in the fight. So now I guess we've got some chance because the Max Midstream has got to have a permit to do this dredging from the Army Corps of Engineers. And is that your avenue to try to deny that permit?
Well, actually, the Corps of Engineer authorized them through it. It was a little juncture through Congress that was authorized in the last session of the Trump administration. And some of the senators we know well in Texas were a part of the push to let them to authorize it. And so right now we're trying to make the Corps of Engineers look at all the new information. Like, for instance, they didn't know it was going to be $1 billion operation. They didn't know there were going to be 600 ships the size of football fields. They didn't know that we now have some sampling of the mercury in that bay, and it's 6 times over what the EPA says at risk. And that's what they're going to be dredging. And so we're trying to make them do a supplemental EIS, means go back to the drawing board and redo this and rethink it. And, you know.
And what we have here, of course, is the conjunction of politics and money.
Oh, you got it.
Diane generously failed to mention the names of our Texas senators. They're John Cornyn and Ted Cruz.
Yeah, exactly.
That are handing out
Cloud and cloud.
favors
Cloud.
to petrochemical giants like lollipops out there. And again, they know nothing about the environmental impact. They know nothing about what this mercury is doing, and they know nothing about the lives of the people who are going to be affected. So they're not our senators; they are the corporate senators, pretty much. So that's the larger fight that we are in. But in the meantime, we got to count on good champions like you standing up to the powers that be on behalf of the powers that ought to be, just ordinary workaday people. So Diane Wilson is one of those champions who is always out there for the people, and we appreciate what you're doing, Diane. Thanks so much for being with us again.
Thank you. And you too, Jim Hightower. You're a legend in Texas.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Can you wrap your head around that? I mean, this is a woman who sank her own boat in protest. And if you don't know that story, Hightower does. But if you, the viewers, don't know that story, I'm going to drop a link to the lowdown issue that we did on Diane in the comments, complete with excerpts from the audio interviews that we've done with her. We've had her on the show before, obviously, and you have to dig into all of the things that she has done in this fight. And our lowdown issue, nails it.
And talk about perseverance. I mean, 40 years she fought often alone with suffering defeat after defeat, but she just kept plugging and taking on this huge corporation from Taiwan, supported by everybody from local officials to the governor of Texas, to the senators, to the United States Congress, and et cetera, et cetera. Yet she took them all on, and including, to some degree, had to take on the environmental movement itself because they didn't think she could win. But she kept going. Now, this is a lady, you mentioned that she sank her own boat. It's hard to grasp the profundity of that, because here's a woman who makes her living from fishing, and she in a ethical and principled movement of protest for both economic and environmental justice for herself and the whole community, went out and sank her boat and sank her livelihood. By the way, that's what that means. If you don't have your boat, you're not fishing in the Gulf of Mexico. And so it's just a profound movement, and all these supposedly small gestures end up being huge. And in her case, as she just explained, she won.
So great. And now she's taken them on even further, and just, she is the dog that does not let go of that bone.
Exactly. And now, since we are in the Texas Gulf Coast with Diane Wilson, let us zip out to the dry country, out to El Paso, Texas, about as far from which the state capital you cannot get. El Paso is 500 miles, at least 5 hours from the state capital. It's closer to 5 other state capitals than it is to Austin, Texas. But they still consider themselves Texas, and they are still battling for progressive values, basically. And one of those champions we're going to visit with today, check back in with our old pal, Beto O'Rourke, now running for governor of the state of Texas. Howdy ho again, Jim Hightower here, bringing you a rare species today. We've got a political maverick committed to grassroots organizing, not just for his own election, but for the people's issues. Say hello again to Beto O'Rourke. Hello, Beto.
Jim, so good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
got you back there in El Paso now. I know you're hitting the road. You're up and down the road pretty seriously, running for governor of the state of Texas. But, you've done something unusual in my experience recently with politicians, and that is instead of just kind of hanging out with rich people between political change and out to the people with a group called Powered by People, working on issues like voter suppression, Texans who left without water, without lights, without heat, without life in many instances. In that freeze last year, battling for worker rights and standing up for democracy and et cetera. I know this is true because I've been with you on a couple of these trips. But let me just ask you now, as an activist and organizer, I can see you doing that. No problem. But as a candidate for governor of Texas, how does that compute?
You know what? It's pretty fun, actually. I'd love to tell you that we're doing this for purely altruistic purposes, and of course, just like you and like all of your listeners and the folks who tune in, I want to make sure that we do better for Texas. But you showed me when I first met you, when you came down to El Paso as our agricultural commissioner, that you can also have a hell of a good time while you're doing good for the people of this state. So as we this week go to places like Dalhart and Pampa and Canadian Texas, as well as Amarillo and Lubbock, not traditionally thought to be Democratic strongholds, at least not in the last 20 or 30 years, we're going to have a really good time. We're not there to sell anything or to force anybody or convince anyone of anything. We want to be with people and listen to them and work together. And we could care less about their party affiliation or who they voted for last time for president, but how we're going to be able to come together and do some good things for the people of Texas. And at least in my life, there's nothing that I enjoy more outside of family than engaging in this work and being with people. I feel truly alive when I'm doing it, and you learn so much. You encounter so many new, extraordinary, amazing people, and it just deepens and renews your faith in Texas. So I'm having a great time doing this, and I'm looking forward to these smaller rural West Texas towns, many of which you won when you were a statewide candidate because you did it the right way. You weren't with the corporations. You weren't with the big people. You were standing up and right beside the farmers, the ranchers, the mom and pop entrepreneurs, the everyday Texans who knew that they had a champion in you. I think getting it right is getting back to the way that you were doing it right when you were running. And like you said, we've been able to travel to some of these towns together, including in Deep East Texas, where they haven't seen a Democrat in a long time, but I got to show up, really not even as Democrats, but just as people who wanted to help those steel workers who'd been locked out from the Exxon Mobil plant in Beaumont, or just listen to people who are trying to fight for the right to vote.
They were glad to see us, right? I mean, they were glad to see us because nobody shows up that wants to stand for them. And you're mentioning the people, and this is important. It's something that very few politicians do anymore. It's one thing to be, you can ask a politician, well, who are you for? Well, I'm for everybody. Well, no. Are you for Elon Musk, who claims to be a Texan now, taking hundreds of millions of dollars in subsidies from us taxpayers to make him even richer, or Jeff Bezos, who grew up in Texas, or Exxon Mobil, as you mentioned? Are you for them? Well, no. You got to be willing to be against the powers that be who are running roughshod over the powers that ought to be, the workaday folks. And that's what I'm impressed with by your work over the years. And you mentioned me, but that's in the tradition of Ralph Yarborough, a former senator from Texas, Barbara Jordan from Houston, of Wright Patman from up in Texarkana, a great fighter against the big bank conglomerates, Henry B. Gonzalez out of El Paso. These are great fighters who not only fought for the people, but won and were able to govern, having that power. So, and I know you're not afraid to make the occasional enemy. And I noticed that one has come out hard against you, a guy named Kelsey Warren, not exactly a household name to most people, to very few people, in fact, but he's a gabillionaire, head of the Energy Transfer Partners, which is a giant pipeline outfit. trying to run pipelines out of using fracking oil out of North Dakota and going through South Dakota and Iowa and I think Nebraska and elsewhere up there, literally ripping through that country. He's also done it down in the Big Valley, Big Bend area of our state with another Trans-Pecos pipeline. That one is called. He had an interesting experience because he's a major contributor to Abbott and as you have been talking about on the campaign trail, Abbott sort of sat on his hindquarters while Texans froze a year ago, February, with a historic level of freeze that killed some 700 people, cost billions of dollars in property damage in people's homes and et cetera. Yet transfer energy did rather well. Tell us about that.
You know, I remember traveling with you, and we were in East Texas, and we were addressing a group that had come out to see us in Beaumont that day. He said, you know, some folks will rob you with a 6-gun and some will rob you with a fountain pen. Yeah. And Kelsey Warren is the robber of the latter type. When temperatures were dropping in Texas, and because the governor failed to winterize the energy grid and weatherize the gas supply, the lights went out, the heat stopped running, the water stopped flowing because the pipes froze. Kelsey Warren's company began to charge 200 times the going rate for gas that was desperately needed by these utilities and cooperatives to run their generators to spin off the electricity to keep us all alive. And as you know, hundreds lost their lives. You mentioned that earlier, and there were tens of billions of dollars in property damage across the state of Texas. And not only did this guy make the most out of a bad situation, but I would argue he broke the law. There's a state statute, the Deceptive Trade Practices Act, which specifically forbids price gouging during a declared emergency, like the one that we had last February. When he was charging 200 times the normal rate of gas or fuel, it would be like going up to a gas pump in your truck and having to pay $425 a gallon to fill it up. That's exactly what he did to the people of Texas. Brazos Electric took on $2 billion in debt just during that storm, paying these exorbitant rates. And it's not like that money's just going to disappear or reappear from somewhere magic. It's going to be paid back by the ratepayers of Brazos Electric, and frankly, ratepayers across the state who are paying on average $45 a month more now than they were at this time last year. That's the Abbott tax that we're calling it, because instead of clawing back those illegal profits that Kelsey Warren and others made, Abbott let them ride free and then took millions of dollars in campaign contributions from them. So that's what we have going on in Texas. Up against Jim, great news is they may have the billionaires, but we, the people, have each other. And we are more than a match for this moment. And I'm convinced that if we go out there, listen to folks, share their stories, and connect one another, as a woman of the cloth told me in Austin, Texas, when we were there for a vigil for the storm victims, we will become the grid, and we will make sure to power this state through this next election and back onto the right track.
Well, Kelsey is trying to make his own payment in a way for the $2.4 billion that he made off of this Abbott freeze that his company made, $2.4 billion, because he made a $1 million contribution to Abbott's campaign. What would you call that?
It sure looks like this is someone who has enjoyed extraordinary, unprecedented benefit. Mayor Ron Nirenberg of San Antonio, Texas, calls this the largest transfer of wealth in Texas history. Kelsey Warren and others and other companies and corporations made $11 billion over the course of 5 days while people were literally freezing in their homes. And then in the first 10 days after the regular legislative session, when Abbott can start legally receiving campaign contributions, he takes more than $4.6 million from the oil and gas industry, from these CEOs and shareholders who made the billions of dollars in profit. So sure looks like there is a connection there to me. And I think it explains the otherwise inexplicable. Why would Abbott after so many people died, so much damage to this state and to our economy, why would he still not require those gas supplier and gas supply CEOs to weatherize their part of the grid, or to make sure that there's some kind of independent market monitor in place to keep this from happening again? I think he is doing very well, Greg Abbott is, with the status quo, even if it means that all of us are subject to the whims of these billionaires and oil and gas companies.
Well, I think that's what Energy Transfer Partners means, transferring our money to them, and then little dad goes back to the politicians who make it possible for them. There is a term for that, but we won't be rude enough to use it here on the air. But Kelsey is quite upset with you. He's in a pique. He says that you have libeled him by pointing this out to voters, and so he is suing you for untold amounts of money. And is that anything that bothers you? Is that anything going to keep you off the campaign trail?
Thankfully, the truth is an accepted defense against libel, and with the facts squarely on our side, we welcome this. It's a great opportunity to remind Texans just what happened to them last February and who was the cause of the problem. It wasn't God, it wasn't Mother Nature, it wasn't the weather. As you know, it gets a lot colder in other parts of the country, and yet they're able to keep the lights on and not price gouge their utility payers. It happened here in Texas because the people in the highest positions of power couldn't be bothered with keeping the power on for the people of this state. They were more concerned with their profits, with their political prospects, with their polling in the Republican primary than they were with the lives of those that they were supposed to serve and represent in this position of public trust. And so we want to make sure that every Texan understands that. And this lawsuit against which we have an extraordinary defense is a wonderful opportunity to do just that.
Well, they've got the fat cats, but we've got the alley cats, and there are more of us than there are of them. And we appreciate your going out there on the issues, not just politicking. It's honest politicking, basically, talking about what's going on and what we might do about it. So we want to stay in touch with you, Beto, as you roam around the great state of Texas. Keep us posted on your work, and we thank you for it.
I will. Thank you for what you're doing. Keep it up, and we'll see you down the road.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Adios.
You know, it is just so rare that you see someone who you consider like a politician is actually an actual organizer and activist too. You know what I mean? Like, that's just blows my mind.
Well, and the good news is, as we demonstrated in this program over the last couple of years, also as I know from traveling around the country and visiting with these grassroots people, it's not that unusual anymore, but particularly among young people, people of color, people who are not used to being considered political candidates. They are now stepping forward. So in every single day, we're getting more people like Beto who are willing to talk about real issues, because the people are becoming the politics. And that is a huge, huge change. If you want real politics, as we say here in Texas, politics with hair on it, then you've got to really want it. And it's a DIY project. You can't go down to Walmart and buy it. You know, you got to make it yourself. And you've got to join with others right in your block, right in your community, right in your social group, right in whatever, to put something together. Challenges the powers that be on behalf of the powers that ought to be. It's what I call the intentionality of politics. The right wing has lots of intentionality. They are intent on taking our voting power away. They're intent on denying health care to everybody. They're intent on running roughshod over workers and the environment. Their intent, et cetera, et cetera. But we tend to just wait on stuff to come our way, and then we react to that. No, we have to be intentional. And that's why we've had progressive politics over the years, is because people were intentional. They said, we are not going to have slavery in America.
Yep.
Women are going to vote. We are going to have a New Deal. We're going to have justice for farmers. against the big conglomerates. We're going to, et cetera, et cetera. And that intentionality and then the perseverance that comes behind that is what produces change and makes the real politics that I'm talking about. So, Deanna, I think we've got something going here.
I think we do. And in our next hour, we're actually going to meet some more of those people who are setting that up for us, who are the organizations and the people behind that kind of elevation of activist politics into structural change. And that's, I mean, structural change sometimes can feel like really unsexy and just like, oh, blah, 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 we have to do policy. But these people are making it fun and they're making it compelling, and we're electing good people. So if you'll stay with us, friends in the audience, if you'll stay with us, we've got a whole nother hour. You're going to switch over to the video that I'm about to post in the comments for our second hour. And if you're watching this later, if you're not watching this live online, you can watch this on Free Speech TV, our wonderful partner in this whole adventure. And otherwise, you can find the second hour of this episode right where you found the first hour. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll see you at the top of the hour. Thanks, y'all.